Okay, good morning. We're going to get started. Thank you for joining us this morning. We wanted to provide an opportunity to the community to let people know a little bit about what is happening in PVUSD at this time. So as you've seen, there are going to be budget reductions in PVUSD, and I want to explain a little bit firsthand what is happening. So when I was selected to be the superintendent of PVUSD, I was aware that there would be a couple of difficult challenges that I was inheriting. Two of those challenges would be converging at the same time. One would be the sunsetting of COVID dollars, and the other would be a severe declining enrollment, hitting PVUSD and Santa Cruz County more so than the rest of the state of California at double the rate. I knew that I was inheriting those challenges and a few others. I don't know that I understood the scope of them to the degree that they are. The one thing that I did promise the board and the community that I could bring to PVUSD was a commitment to honesty and to transparency, and that throughout the process that I would always include the community. One of the goals that I also had was to develop strong partnerships with our labor partners. We developed the sustainable budget team throughout this process as an attempt to bring in the community to give input into how we would begin to attempt the reductions, with the particular eye on how we had spent money with one-time dollars, known as COVID dollars or ESSER funding. The Sustainable Budget Committee or team was formed with 24 community members who represent parents, 12 parents from our different grade spans. They represent teachers, administrators, and community members. These were all volunteers who knew that at the end of the process, they would be making a recommendation to the board on where they saw the first cuts to be made to our budget. Those recommendations were surrounding positions that had been added with one-time funding. The recommendations were made to the board, and the board approved some of the recommendations on January 15th. At the same time, and alongside the decisions that we needed to make with positions that were added with one-time funding, is also the decisions that we need to look at with our severe declining enrollment. The declining enrollment that we look at is students who are no longer attending our schools. In the state of California, the way we are funded is specifically tied to the number of students who attend our schools and the number of days they're attending. There is no other way that we're funded. We do get grant funding, and our district is particularly good at finding grants to increase and improve services to our students. But that grant funding is extra and in addition to our base funding services. When we look at our staffing for the following school year, so for the 25-26 school year, there is no other way to look at staffing other than to look at our projected number of students and to match that number of students to the number of teachers we will need to teach those students. We use the California Education Code that states the law for the number of students in our classroom, and then we base that also on our collective bargaining agreement. We have no intent to change our collective bargaining agreement, and we will honor our collective bargaining agreement for class size. Based on those things, we then determine the number of teachers necessary to teach our students. We are funded for no more or no less in the state of California, and we have to honor that. This year, we went about that staffing process, and we engaged in the most transparent process that I have known this district to engage in. We went alongside our union partners. We included them every step of the way, much like we did with our sustainable budget team, which all of that process was live streamed, recorded, posted on our website, and all of the materials that we use for sustainable budget team were also recorded and posted on our website. We have the utmost process for transparency that I've seen any district engage in. For our union partners and engaging in our staffing process, we've brought them in every step of the way. And we continue to commit to that transparency. This year, something that has been different with our process in terms of reductions is that the resolution for reductions is being brought forward in open session. That has not been done this year. We are going to commit to engaging in that process because that is the right thing to do. That's the honest thing to do, and we believe that our community deserves to see the actions that PVUSD is taking. It has not been done in the past. It is a hard thing to do, but we, again, completely commit to honesty. This is hard. No district wants to engage in reductions, but we are also trying to mitigate those reductions by engaging in activities and things that we can do, such as offering a $10,000 retirement benefit to our teachers to try to help mitigate and soften the reductions that we need to make. We are also want to explain that the reduction list is inclusive of all positions being reduced. It includes retirements. It includes resignations. It includes temporary contracts. A temporary contract is an annual contract that is just a year to year. When a person signs on for a temporary contract, they know that that contract is going to be 1 year long. So we will continue to commit to working side by side with our union partners. We will continue to commit to being honest and transparent with our community. We will continue to commit to doing anything we can to help alongside this process. And most of all, we will continue to commit to making responsible decisions so that our decision making will lie with the hands of the community going forward. Thank you. If there are any questions, I would be willing to entertain those.
So I'm sensing that there's, sure. I'm sensing that there might be a little bit of damage control happening here. And I'm wondering if you can touch on that, like what's happening with that?
No, I wouldn't call it damage control. I actually just want to make sure that our community is aware and understands what's happening.
Another question. So if memory serves, there's 12 release time teachers that are on the list. How is the district going to sort of honor the teachers' contractual right, that's the wrong word, but contractual right to their release time?
Yes, so the release time is a contractual right. And so when we staff for release time, we're looking at exactly how much release time do we need to ensure that teachers get the release that they deserve per contract. So we have ensured that we are providing that for our teachers.
How are you going to do that?
We have scheduling and a program that we use to make sure that we're providing that.
You mentioned, sorry. No problem. You mentioned that some of the contracts that we're talking about here were the annual contracts. How many of those are there in the district?
I believe the number is 39.
Yeah, thanks.
That's okay. I think one thing we can add that touches on how many teachers is this is the first step in a longer process. So if the board were to approve the two resolutions going forward, one is a classified resolution and one is a certificated resolution. This is the first step in an ongoing process. The next step is to look at seniority lists. So all of the reductions are based on seniority. So we then have a process that HR will engage in to look at who has the least seniority, and moving forward, how does that work through? Which includes those temporary contracts, resignations, retirements, that type of thing.
So is there a threshold that maybe you start with looking at seniority? Like
Temporary contracts ends up being the first.
Sorry?
A temporary contract is the first.
Temporary, but I mean, is there a number like you have to be here at least 20 years before we start?
No.
Okay.
It's just least senior.
Hillary Ojeda from Lookout Santa Cruz. So the stabilization plan that was approved, there were like dollar amounts for, for example, the link to like right sizing. Has that changed at all compared to the numbers that are here? Like, are there more included in this?
Are you referring to sustainable budget team, right sizing?
Yeah.
One of the meetings that we held?
Yes, I think so.
I'm not sure if I understand your question.
So the plan that was approved in January, actually,
Okay.
sorry.
Yes. No, so the plan that was approved in January was a dollar amount. And so once the dollar amount was approved by the Board of Education, then our team went back to look at what does that dollar amount equate to in terms of positions. And so we had to do some work to determine that. And then once we determined what the number of positions was, that's the resolution that the board will see before them at this meeting on February 12th.
Okay. So but the dollar amount came from
The sustainable budget team and
Yeah.
our determination of what we needed to reduce by in this year to continue in our multi-year projections to be fiscally solvent in next year and in our out years.
Okay. I guess I'm trying to understand then how you calculated right sizing for the district in elementary school sites and versus how much of it was, a budget decision. Does that make sense?
It does. I think that's one of the things that is hard to understand. School finance can be very complex. So at the beginning, when I was just talking about the two things that are converging is the one-time ESSER dollars. So we had one-time funding and we added positions with one-time funding. So those positions are almost separate from what we do just running a school district, having teachers to teach students. So we added positions with dollars that no longer exist. So technically, we can no longer afford those positions, and we have to look at how do we begin the reduction of those positions that we added. There's some choice that we can make if these positions are really working and helping students, is there something that we maybe can adjust? Because there is a little bit of adjustment room. And that's where we ask the sustainable budget team as we make thoughtful decisions around making reductions so that we don't do it all at one time, which would be very hard on a system. Where do we begin? And that was the question posed to the sustainable budget team. So they made the recommendations as a community, representing their community on where they thought we should begin those reductions. The next piece of our school budget is just addressing our declining enrollment, how we're funded to run our day-to-day program. How we're funded to run our day-to-day program is based on enrollment. So a school district needs to align their day-to-day operations based on the number of students that are projected to be enrolled each year. So that's kind of the part two of what we need to look at to have a sustainable budget. So they're converging together. If COVID hadn't happened or existed, then what districts would normally be looking at on a year-to-year basis would just be their enrollment and aligning their budget to their regular enrollment. In the state of California, if we weren't seeing this declining enrollment, our budgets and these processes would be relatively stable. But California has this declining enrollment that's been happening consistently over many years and then has become exaggerated since COVID. In Santa Cruz County, it's been happening at a much greater rate. So California is at about 8% rate. Santa Cruz County has been happening at a 16% rate. So that's very significant. I have Jenny here, so she could correct me if I have my numbers wrong, but I believe we're projected to lose 500 students next year. 600. That's a lot of students. That equates to quite a bit in funding. And so that's the budget we need to that run our program on. And so that's the other thing that we have to address. So it's kind of two things at one that we are working with this year. And it is a lot.
Thank you for that. And so in the plan that was approved last month, did that amount increase at all? Or, I guess in terms of how it translated into positions? Sorry.
I think that's the really challenging thing to understand is that amount was simply and solely the ESSER dollar amount. So that amount has not increased because that was only the ESSER amount. And so the board approved the $5 million reduction. That was only the one-time funding reduction of positions added with one-time funding. That was it. So there's no position on there that wasn't added with one-time funding. That's the only thing being reduced in that $5 million. There's nothing out of the general fund. That was just one-time dollar positions. So nothing has changed from that board decision. What has had to be addressed since, and that's part of our normal our normal process and scope and sequence of what you do in a school year, is looking at your enrollment and then doing your regular staffing process that you would do as you plan for the next year. And it's always this scope and sequence. So February of every school year is always, okay, time to look at where we're at and make the adjustments we need based on our projections. And that's because of the legal deadlines and timelines that we have to meet in terms of reductions.
Got it. Okay, so
Yeah.
sorry if you mentioned that
It's very complex.
when I walked in and I missed that. But so there is definitely more positions in these resolutions than was, I guess, included in the
last month's discussion.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Two
Yeah.
separate things. So last month's discussion was not inclusive of enrollment and staffing procedures. That was a separate discussion.
Okay. Is it
Yeah.
okay if I ask another? Okay. And sorry if I'm also missing this, but I don't see, I guess it would be in classified. I see, 3 FTE for mental health clinician. I don't see social emotional counselors, and, it seemed like it was going to be so much more.
That's correct. The mental health clinicians are a classified position, and the social emotional counselors are a certificated position, and you'll see them listed under certificated as simply counselors.
Okay.
Mhm.
Got it. So it's 9 FTE total that translated from that dollar amount,
Correct.
essentially. Okay. And is that all coming from the one-time funding cuts, or is any of that also including right sizing?
That is one-time funding.
Okay. So how many in total counselors and mental health clinicians are you going to retain or keep?
The total, I believe we have 26 counselors that we are in total. And mental health clinicians, I believe we have 15. I may be, give or take. So we are still retaining that, and we will retain that. We're not by any means closing the programming at all. We will always need counseling, so that remains.
Okay. Yeah, do you want to say anything to that? There was so much concern, over the last few months about those positions. Do you have anything?
Counselors are a broad term for different services that happen in a school district. So we have academic counseling that happens in the high schools, and that is legally you need those. So those will always remain. We also have social emotional counseling in this district that is a broad term for many services offered. So there's no intent to completely reduce that at all. Our mental health clinicians, we've had mental health clinicians in this district for many, many, many years. Some of that is because of our special education services and our ERMS counselors. That's special education and services that our students with IEPs need. And I don't foresee that would be reduced, although, as we look at our programming and what we need, and there's a lot of different approaches that are being implemented right now in mental health counseling, and so things could change, but the social emotional counselors and the counseling services are staying intact. They're not being completely reduced at this time.
Thank you. And sorry, one clarification on the, so the counselors, you said you're keeping, so sorry, I forgot the number. How many counselors?
I don't have the exact number. I want to be careful on that.
Okay. But it was more than 10.
Yes.
So some of those are academic
Yes.
and not social emotional, right?
Yes.
So how many, do you know how many are social emotional counselors are you keeping generally?
I want
Estimate.
to say, because we have them at our junior highs, I want to say at least 6.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
So Wednesday night, let's say the trustees do not approve this. What happens then?
Yes, good question. So if this is not approved to pass, we put ourselves at risk of not having a qualified budget. By qualified, or sorry, of being, needing to state that we would need help and that we're qualified to not be fiscally solvent. If we have to declare that we're qualified, that basically means that we're saying we need help. We are not going to meet our multi-year projections of having the reserve that is required by the state of California. It would mean that we are deficit spending, that we are going into that healthy reserve, and that we are at risk of state takeover. If a state takeover were to happen, what that means is that we were not able to be financially responsible to make the decisions as a district, and then the state comes and makes those decisions for you. So you lose your ability as a community to make the decisions for your own students as you would see fit. A very local example of where that happened is at Live Oak, and that would be very unfortunate. We have an amazing CBO who has done a very great job in many board meetings explaining where our multi-year projections are and where we need to be. I think now, more than ever, we do need to have a healthy reserve and not put ourselves in a place of deficit spending. We know that there are different things happening on the national landscape, and we also know that California has just experienced natural disasters of a magnitude we've never ever seen before. And we don't know the impact of any of those things right now. And so to be able to put ourselves in a place where we know we have a safety net is really paramount. In the past, there's been deferments that California has done. And what that means is when there's a deferment, the state says, we can't pay you right now. We are gonna pay you down the road, but for right now, you're gonna need to take out a loan to be able to pay your bills. And districts do that, and that has happened before, but there is no bank that is going to give a loan to a school district that doesn't have a healthy reserve. That's our collateral. So we do need to be able to think through that and forward think and position ourselves to be fiscally solvent and fiscally responsible. And so if we aren't able to pass this, we do put ourselves at those risks.
So that sort of, leads to the question I had next, is that I'm hearing talk from the union that, the district has a $61 million, if my memory serves, reserve. That's probably going to be the message from speakers Wednesday night. Is that going to be your message to them, saying we have to have this to stay safe?
Yeah. Currently, we have a 15% reserve. That does not equate to $60 million. I think what the union might be looking at is a combination of our restricted and unrestricted dollars, and Jenny can explain that much better than I can, and I'll turn it over to her. But yes, I have heard that, and go ahead, Jenny.
Hi, good morning. My name is Jenny M. I'm the Chief Business Officer. So first I wanted to let you know that we released a really helpful FAQ and letter to the community that's posted on our social media as well as our website that goes into a little bit more detail that might be helpful. but I can give a summary to the fund balance. So right now, and before I kind of go into that, let me take a couple steps back and give a little bit more context. So in the state of California, and this is in our education code, all school districts are required to present a multi-year budget projection with each budget cycle. So that means we have to show that we can meet the minimum. They call it the reserve for economic uncertainties, not only in the current budget year, but 2 years out. So that's 3 years that we need to show that we can meet our minimum reserve. So what I want to say also is for the size of our school district, our required reserve is 3%. That is the floor. That is not what I would say is a healthy reserve. It's not what I would say is a recommended reserve, and that is not the average reserve that we see in school districts across California. That is the legally mandated minimum floor that the state of California is requiring. So as part of the 3-year budget projections, when we looked at first interim, which was back in December, our unrestricted general fund had a total fund balance of about, I believe it was 56 million. But when we're looking at what's happening in our budget going into the 3 years, we have to remember none of the years have any negotiated increases included because we have not settled for any years yet with any of our bargaining units. So that is going to be added. We also have, from last year to this year, our LCFF funding, which I like to call the bread and butter of school district funding. That is the main source of funding that pays for our general education program, including all of our general education teachers. The LCFF funding from last year to this year has decreased by an estimated $10 million. So here we are now at this crossroads. We have lost the one-time ESSER money from the federal and state governments that we use to increase services and supports, including staffing. Our LCFF money, which is our ongoing bread and butter, from 1 year to another, $10 million decrease, and that's going to continue. We lost 18% enrollment this past decade, probably 16 to 18% more in the next decade, according to estimates from the Department of Finance. So we follow our collective bargaining agreements that show the class sizes, but we are at a crossroads right now. And the reason why the education code and the California Department of Education requires a multi-year projection is because of Assembly Bill AB 1200. So this got put into place in the 1990s, I believe. And it was because the state started to see a lot of school districts go into fiscal distress. So they said, you need to provide a multi-year projection because part of your responsibility and the board's responsibility is being able to look at what's coming down the road. So here we have this gift. We have all of the statutes and the requirements from the state of California saying, look at your multi-year projections. So that is what we are bringing forward to the community because everyone up here, including Dr. Contreras, and especially Dr. Contreras, we need to be looking 3, 5, 10 years down the road. And this is how, these are the tools at our disposal.
Just one more. Can the board on Wednesday night make different decisions? They say, we don't want that cut, we want something else cut. Is that an option that they have, or do they have to go with staff recommendation?
I have cautioned against doing that.
So for, you know, getting rid of so many teachers, sorry to say it that way, but how much, I guess, I'm forgetting the word that you use, I guess, how much movement will there be of teachers from one school to another to fill, you know, what will be gaps, I guess?
That, like I said earlier, we're just in the beginning of a longer process right now, and that remains to be seen. We have offered the $10,000 retirement incentive upon board approval on Wednesday. So there's a lot of pieces that we still don't know yet how that may fall.
And are any schools getting, I guess, you know, close to being just really, having really low occupancy, and is that bringing up considerations for closures soon?
Most of our schools are about 60%. Some of them are more, some of them are at capacity. We haven't been looking at school closures at this time.
And then I guess, are any programs, services being completely cut because of these layoffs?
No.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for being here and for giving the opportunity to PVUSD to help the community understand what is happening right now. Thank you.